To any child, the presence of a parent in a crisis is everything. It is the firm hand to grasp, the comforting voice that says, "You will be okay." It is the rock when terror seems too much. But for Isabel Brown, her father's failure to be present at the most agonizing moment of her childhood wasn't disappointing. It was a scarring injury. And according to insiders and emergent legal theory, that injury may now be the basis for a lawsuit, one that could not only devastate a patriarch financially, but also reframe what it really means to be a father in the eyes of the law. Today, we're going deep into a tale that has been in the background until today, a speculative but forceful critique based on hearsay news reports and past precedent. This is Isabel's battle for justice. Hello all, welcome to the channel. Before we break down the sensational news of this rumored lawsuit, I have one fast request to ask. What we're about to dive into is one of the most intense, in-depth theories we've ever tackled. If you think a parent's primary responsibility is always their child, smash that like button instantly, and if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell, because trust me, you won't want to miss a single notification as this tale unravels. Okay, let's get at it. In order to comprehend the full magnitude of this rumored lawsuit, we can't simply consider one missed flight. We must look back. We must view the years of anguish, broken vows, and dysfunctional family life that added up to create a perfect storm of litigation. This is not about one bad choice. It is about a series of events that Isabel's lawyers could reasonably make the case had constituted a catastrophic breakdown of parental responsibility. Isabel Brown fought scoliosis for years. Fans saw her endure nonstop pain, wear restrictive braces, and perform agonizing physical therapy, all in the hopes of avoiding surgery. And throughout it all, her mom Christine was there with her rock, her supporter, her constant presence. Where was Kody? Yes, the show featured him in attendance at times, but even then, there was distance. A chill he insisted on non-surgical methods, which initially may seem understandable. But rumors from those nearest the family hint otherwise, that his hesitation wasn't so much about Isabel's health, but about avoiding the logistical and financial hassle her surgery represented. Let's be honest, Kody's world by that point revolved almost entirely around one household. Robyn's anything requiring him to step outside that orbit was treated as a burden. So when Isabel faced a major spinal surgery, what did he say? "I'm not going to be able to go. You'll have to go by yourself." Consider that. Those words weren't uttered to a grown-up business leader off to have a minor operation. They were uttered to his frightened teenage daughter, ready to have her spine fused. And that is where the legal argument purportedly starts to coalesce. The case, the one filed as Isabel Thompson against Kody Brown, by her married name, revolves around two potent legal arguments: breach of parental duty of care and negligent infliction of emotional distress, according to reports. Now, proving these in court isn't easy. Family law is messy, and judges are hesitant to police parenting choices. But Isabel's legal team, we're told, argues this wasn't just poor judgment, it was gross negligence, with real, measurable consequences. The year was 2020, the world was paralyzed by a pandemic, and Kody Brown, he crowned himself the supreme commander of his family's health and safety. His presently notorious COVID rules turned from safety to control. He insisted on complete obedience, and those who bucked, Christine and Janelle mostly, were exiled from his inner circle. This became the pillar of Kody's defense, both on television and by extension, in this imaginary court battle. He would contend that flying to the East Coast, visiting a hospital, and then coming back would put Robyn and their younger kids, Solomon and Ariella, in harm's way. On paper, that would be responsible. But let's dissect it the way Isabel's lawyers would. First, the inconsistency. His rules were never enforced equally. They were warped and molded for expediency. Kody and Robyn functioned as a closed system, while the rest of the family were outsiders, risks to be contained. Second, the lack of solutions. If Kody was truly torn between two duties, what options could he have considered? He could have driven instead of flown. He could have flown, then quarantined for 2 weeks afterward in a hotel, RV, or even in Meri's empty house. He could have coordinated with Isabel's medical team, who already had extremely strict hospital safety measures in place. But he attempted none of these. Rather, he offered a false dichotomy: either defend Robyn's children or stand by Isabel during her surgery. The choice had already been made, and Isabel lost. According to one former production assistant, the arguments over the surgery were far more explosive than what aired. Christine even offered to pay for Kody's quarantine if he would just be there. His alleged response: "It's not just about quarantine, it's about principle. The family needs to learn we're all making sacrifices." Let that sink in. He supposedly made his daughter's life-changing surgery into a lesson on his authority. If true, this changes the story from bad judgment to intentional negligence. By then, Isabel's well-being was not the issue. It was collateral damage in a power struggle. He was supposedly completely aware of his daughter's need and deliberately opted to ignore it, prioritizing his own ego and control needs over her welfare. Now on to the actual surgery and to the agony that ensued. Christine accompanied Isabel to New Jersey on a plane ride. They quarantined correctly, respected every precaution, and braced themselves for what would be the most difficult moment in Isabel's childhood. Christine was a battler, slogging through a frightening medical odyssey in a foreign metropolis, hundreds of miles from home. All by herself, the operation was successful. But when Isabel awoke, she found herself in a world of intolerable agony. We all witnessed it: the groans, the sobs, the raw, unmasking pain of a body that had been irrevocably changed. And at the moment of basic pain, what did Isabel demand? Her father. Through her tears, she explained, it is hard. I don't know. It is just sad." And Christine, distraught, breathed softly, "He is breaking her heart." Isabel's lawyers would pounce on this exact moment. They would bring in psychologists and experts in trauma to describe what occurred neurologically. This wasn't sadness. This was a child in a place of raw vulnerability, having what experts refer to as an attachment injury. A lawyer we spoke to phrased it thus: "The duty of care of a parent is more than just food, clothes, and housing. That is the minimum. It involves emotional and psychological care, particularly at foreseen times of great distress, such as a serious surgery." By not being present, Kody's absence was so deep, so unforgivable, that it became abandonment of that duty. Nowadays, such cases are exceptional and hard to win. But Isabel's case has an unusual twist: decades of high-definition video documenting the before, during, and after. The jury wouldn't merely be told about her pain. They would witness it live. So the question is, why now? Isabel is an adult, married, and appears to be well-adjusted. Why put her family and herself through the ugliness of a public lawsuit? Here is where our theory gets interesting. From what we have pieced together based on insider comments and trauma studies, this lawsuit wasn't motivated by greed. It wasn't about money. It was about validation and accountability that Isabel never got. Consider this. All these years following the surgery, did Kody ever apologize? Did he ever sit down with Isabel and say, "I made a catastrophic error. I was selfish. I let you down as a dad, and I'm so sorry. How do I fix this?" No, instead, we witnessed him doubling down. He accused Christine, said the kids were turned against him and made himself out to be the victim. He rebranded history, depicting his absence as not a choice, but something necessitated by COVID and a disloyal wife. It was the last straw in late Faye, said an insider. Isabel witnessed Kody with Solomon and Iella. They're engaged, rejuggling his schedule for one of their small school functions, and at that instant, something clicked. It was never about COVID. It was never about safety. It was about priorities. And she was not one. This is textbook trauma response. Someone can suppress the pain, even live well for years. But one trigger, and it all comes flooding back. Not only as a memory, but a raw wound. The understanding that she had always been kept secondary, even expendable, reopened all the things she had suppressed. Based on our theory, Isabel started seeing a family trauma therapist, and it was supposedly her therapist who reinterpreted Kody's behavior, not even just bad parenting, but emotional neglect and abandonment with legal consequences. The purpose of the suit wasn't punishment, it was affirmation. To have an impartial third party, judge and jury, review the evidence and declare, you weren't mistaken. What was done to you wasn't all right. He did you wrong, the amount reported. Faye was no coincidence. It wasn't for cars or for luxury. It was symbolic. A lifetime of therapy, a savings for her to provide opportunity for her future children she was unable to secure for herself, and a price put on a failure of a father. The suit itself supposedly was brought in Utah Civil Court, where the bulk of the family soap opera took place, and where Christine and the children resided after leaving Flagstaff. The plaintiff, Isabel Thompson. The defendant, Kody Brown. Count 1, breach of parental duty of care. Isabel's lawyers argue that Kody had a legal duty to provide for her emotional and physical well-being, and that his refusal to be there for a pre-planned life-altering surgery was a willful breach of that duty. No one expected him to be there, Faye, but his total absence at the most critical moment, they argue, dropped so far below the minimum standard of care that it became negligence. Count 2, negligent infliction of emotional distress. That is the nub of the case. To establish it, Isabel's lawyers need to demonstrate that Kody was negligent, or even intentional, and that it was foreseeable his failure to attend would result in serious emotional damage. And come on! Is it that much of a stretch to suggest a teenager would be traumatized if her dad missed her spinal surgery? Piece of cake, but that is not all. Her lawyers assert the harm wasn't only emotional, it was physical. They would subpoena her medical and therapy records, bring in expert witnesses, and testify that severe emotional distress can prolong recovery time, enhance reliance on painkillers, and create anxiety, depression, even PTSD. Their argument is straightforward. Kody's no-show didn't only shatter her heart, it might have complicated her recovery and left permanent marks. And that is when Kody's defense kicks in. Of course, Kody would retain his own lawyers. His defense would be multifaceted. First off, parental discretion. His attorneys would assert that decisions on child rearing are intensely personal, not subject to judicial interference. A parent, they'd argue, can balance risks and make decisions he thinks are in the best interests of his whole family. Second, the pandemic defense. They'd rely mostly on the argument that these were extraordinary times. Kody, they'd say, was a patriarch attempting to handle an unprecedented crisis, having to make decisions that were impossible. They would remind the jury that hindsight is 20/20ths. And third, no provable injury. Kody's people would attempt to sever the chain of causation, arguing Isabel would have been hurt anyway, that her distress wasn't his responsibility. More cynically, they'd attempt to portray Isabel as too sensitive, or worse, manipulated by Christine in a money grab instigated by an angry ex-wife. This is the battlefield, a daughter's proven suffering on one side, a father cloaked in parental privilege and insurmountable dilemmas on the other. But first comes the harsh discovery stage before the trial proper. Kody would have to sit for a deposition. Under oath, each word transcribed. No cameras allowed, no space for bluster. Just questions and answers he can't flee from. Imagine Isabel's attorney leaning in. Mr. Brown, you say you were too scared to fly to your daughter's operation in September 2020, correct? Yes. So can you tell us why, weeks later, you and your wife, Robyn, flew to a wedding? Mr. Brown, you indicated that you needed to shield your young kids. What health specialist advised you that a routine fortnight of quarantine would be inadequate? Mr. Brown, did you know how much pain Isabel was in prior to surgery? Did you know she specifically requested your presence? Why were her emotional needs, while undergoing spinal fusion surgery, less pressing than attending a wedding? Under those bright lights in that silent deposition room, Kody's standard deflection and bluster would disintegrate. All the contradictions, all the excuses would be sealed into the public record, available to be employed against him at trial. And that is where the basis of Kody's defense would start to crumble, well before a jury even saw the case. And now the tale enters the courtroom itself. This is where family squabbles become legal realities. Picture it, a crowded courtroom. Reporters jammed in the back. The Brown family spread out on the benches, loyalties openly divided. Meri and Robyn sitting behind Kody, Christine, Janelle, and a number of adult children sitting behind Isabel. The air so charged with tension that you could cut it with a knife. The trial commences. On Monday morning, Isabel's attorney, astute and compassionate attorney, Jessica Morales, approaches the jury. Her opening argument is not replete with legalese. It is a narrative. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she starts. This case is about a promise that we all make to our children. When you are in pain, I will be there. When you are frightened, I will hold your hand. When you have to endure the most frightening day of your life, you will not have to endure it by yourself. Today, we are here because the defendant, Mr. Kody Brown, did not only violate that promise to his daughter, Isabel, he destroyed it. He left her at her time of greatest need, and he did so not on grounds of noble safety concerns, but on grounds of convenience, preference, and appalling selfishness. We will demonstrate through evidence and testimony that his absence was not the product of an impossible decision. It was one that he made with ease, and it was one that inflicted lasting damage on his daughter, damage that she still bears today. We are here today to urge you to hold him accountable for the price of that decision. It is strong, emotional, a broken sacred trust. Next, Kody's attorney, Mark Reynolds, rises to his feet. He is the antithesis of Morales, direct, detached, no frills. His task is to de-emotionalize. Ladies and gentlemen, he starts, what you've just listened to was an emotional tale. But it isn't true. The truth is this case is a bid to punish a father for being a responsible, tough decision maker in the middle of a global pandemic. Kody Brown has 18 children. His responsibility is not just to one child, but to all of them, particularly the young and vulnerable ones in his own home. He did the agonizing thing to safeguard the many at the expense of disappointing the one. This suit is not about hurt. It is about gain. It is a retaliatory assault planned by a resentful former wife who has spent years poisoning children against their dad. We will demonstrate Kody Brown behaved as a reasonable and caring father, and we will demonstrate that this lawsuit is simply a vicious family feud that belongs nowhere near a courtroom and voile-fait. Two stories, head-on collision. Is Kody a reckless dad who left his daughter behind, or an overstressed patriarch with impossible decisions to make? The jury has to decide, and Isabel's camp would not dawdle. Their first bombshell piece of evidence, Exhibit A, the flight logs. The courtroom goes silent when Miss Morales puts a paper on the projector to be viewed by the jury. Jessica Morales, would you please tell us what this document is? The witness adjusts her glasses. These are the flight logs for Mr. Kody Brown and Mrs. Robyn Brown for a round-trip flight from Flagstaff, Arizona to Denver, Colorado during October of 2020. A murmured ripple runs through the courtroom. Morales allows the pause to breathe before continuing. And can you verify the destination of this trip, as reflected by the related car rental and accommodation reservations booked using the same credit card? The defense attorney stands up. Objection, hearsay. The witness can only speak to the flight manifests. Sustained, the judge decrees. Morales nods serenely. Of course, Your Honor, she addresses the jury once again. But Mr. Brown himself previously testified to the reason behind this trip in his deposition. Let me read from page 87, line 12. She continues reading aloud. Question: Did you and Robyn Brown fly to Denver in October 2020? Answer: Yes. Question: What was the purpose of this trip? Answer: We attended a friend's wedding. And with that, the courtroom is hit with a bombshell. This is the silver bullet. The collapse of Kody's defense. Keep in mind, Isabel's surgery had occurred just weeks prior to this, in late September 2020. Kody had declared it was altogether too risky to fly, altogether too risky to expose himself around others, that he couldn't risk exposure for the family's good. And yet here he was, getting onto a plane with Robyn to party at a wedding. Morales doesn't linger. She makes her point with precision. A medically necessary operation for his own daughter, too risky. But a wedding for Robyn's buddy, worth the gamble. What does that do for your confidence in his priorities? What does it say about the genuineness of his so-called procedures? The response is clear. It reveals his rules for what they are. A sham, a means of control, an excuse for abandonment. His integrity is destroyed. No juror would be able to reconcile a man who refuses to accompany his daughter through surgery and is waiting anxiously to fly out and party a couple of weeks later. And then the clincher testimony, the expert witness. Dr. Michael Abrams, a renowned orthopedic surgeon, takes the stand, dignified, professional, and exuding authority. He fills the room with his presence immediately. Dr. Abrams, Morales starts. As a professional, in your expert opinion, what is the value of parental support in helping a patient heal from a serious surgery such as Isabel's? It is important, Abrams responds without faltering. Absolutely important. The evidence is overwhelming. Emotional and psychological support immediately affects physical recovery, particularly in children and teenagers. Morales pushes on. Can you explain how? A patient who knows he or she is safe, supported, and loved produces lower cortisol, the stress hormone. Lower cortisol diminishes inflammation, so there is less pain and quicker healing. These patients need less medication, recover faster, and are more inclined to engage in therapy. The comforting presence of a well-known parent is as strong as some of the medications we write. It is a critical element of healing. Her words weighed so heavily. Janelle had always been the rational one, the calm voice in the storm. If even she was going to tell them that Kody's regulations were no more than a cover, the jury would hear her. Then the denouement. Kody Brown himself testified. Under direct questioning by his own attorney, he was composed, detached, attempting to present himself as an adoring father weighed down by impossible leadership. But as soon as Jessica Morales started cross-examining, the cracks began to show. Mr. Brown, she opened, you adore your daughter Isabel, don't you? Of course I do. With all my heart, he replied, attempting to be sincere. And you knew she was in huge pain, afraid of her surgery. Yes, it was a very tough situation. A tough situation for her, or for you? Morales asked. Kody fidgeted. It was tough for all of us. But you weren't the one getting your spine fused, were you, Mr. Brown? And then there was the wedding. Jessica presented the facts in a meticulous way. You traveled across the country, you slept in a hotel, you went to a big wedding with all kinds of guests traveling in from everywhere. Is that right? Kody attempted to make his case. That was different. We were cautious. More cautious than a hospital with strict safety rules, he fumbled. Well, you see, I had to balance the risk for the family, for the kids. So the danger of going to a wedding was reasonable, but the danger of being with your daughter after life-altering surgery wasn't. That is your word. Now his serene mask was shattered. His voice rose. You are distorting my words. This is what Christine does. She distorts everything. I was attempting to be a good father to all my children. What is a man to do when he is being tugged in 18 different directions? It was impossible. At that moment, the jury didn't observe a great father. They observed fury, blame, shifting, the very same victim act audiences had seen on television for years. But in a courtroom, it wasn't melodrama, it was damning. Kody was crumbling under stress. Finally, Isabel herself testified. She was calm, reserved, and poignantly sincere. Isabel Morales asked softly, "Can you describe to the jury what you felt when you awoke after surgery?" "Pain," Isabel whispered. "More pain than I ever thought possible, and fear. I was somewhere unfamiliar. My body was broken, and I just wanted my dad." Her voice trembled, but she continued. "My mom was great. She gave me everything, but it seemed like something was missing. Like he didn't care if I was important or not. Like I was just a sacrifice he could make." The courtroom was quiet. "And how has that moment impacted you since?" "It is a wound," she replied, welling up. "I have a great life, a great husband, but inside, I still think that when things get really tough, I'll be left alone." That is what he taught me that day. I am here because I want to heal. But I can't heal until he is held accountable for the damage he inflicted. Her testimony wasn't laced with anger. She was imbued with sorrow, a profound, heart-wrenching sadness no juror could disregard. Cross-examining her was a trap for Kody's attorney. Push too aggressively and he'd appear like a beast. Go too easy on her and her testimony would stay intact. Either, it was done. When the jury deliberated, it took less than 3 hours. The verdict was unanimous. The bailiff read the verdict in the case of Isabel Thompson against Kody Brown on the claim of negligent infliction of emotional distress. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff. A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. Christine cried, holding Isabel close. Kody was motionless, as if he'd been hit by a physical blow. The damages $250,000 to be held in trust for Isabel's education and healing, but even that wasn't the end of the trial. The last word still belonged to the judge, and in this instance, the judge did not merely render a verdict. She uttered a statement that would resonate throughout the Brown family and through the fan base for years to come. She pushed her glasses up her nose, looked down at the papers before her, then locked her gaze on the defendant. The room was quiet when she spoke. Her tone was cold, clear, and measured. "Mr. Brown, rise." Kody rose slowly, stiffly, his face ashen. "And what is the reverse situation, doctor, when a patient is abandoned?" "The opposite," Abrams says. "Increased stress, increased inflammation, increased pain, heavier use of medications, and longer recovery. The emotional wounds can also persist, anxiety, depression, even PTSD associated with medical events." "Doctor," Morales moves closer. "In your professional medical opinion, was Kody Brown's absence from Isabel's surgery and recovery detrimental?" "Absolutely," Abrams answers firmly. "It was the worst possible time for a father to be away. His choice directly undermined her recovery. medically, emotionally, and psychologically. The jury leans forward, every word hanging. Abrams has moved Isabel's suffering into unshakable medical fact, measurable, scientific, irrefutable. When Kody's attorney stands to cross-examine, he attempts to mitigate the harm. Dr. Abrams, Isabel's surgery was a success. Isn't that right? The procedure itself was a success. Yes. And she did recover finally, she did. But she recovered much harder than she ought to have. Her mother was amazing, but the lack of a father filled an emotional space that made it much harder for her to heal. In my expert opinion, it was one of the things that contributed to her anguish. The testimony is heartbreaking. It gives the missing piece. Kody's decisions didn't only injure feelings, they inflicted actual harm. And then there is the family. Kody Brown steps into the stand, the prosecution's star witness. Her presence is heartbreaking and powerful. She shares Isabel's years of suffering, Kody's insensitivity, and the heart-wrenching decision to undergo surgery alone. She shares her daughter screaming out for her father in the hospital, her voice shaking with strength and sorrow. It is raw, it is emotional, it is unforgettable. The defense, desperate, fights back. Kody's lawyer turns his tone sharp. Mrs. Brown, or is it Miss Woolley now? You had been miserable in your marriage for years, right? Kody remains calm. Yes, my marriage was problematic. In fact, you wanted to leave years ago before this surgery, isn't that correct? I was not happy, she acknowledges. But I was devoted to my family. And just like that, the courtroom transforms into something more than a trial. It becomes a spectacle, a collision of law, family, and betrayal. Like an episode of Sister Wives, only this time, with real consequences. Mark Reynolds leaned forward with a biting question. Mrs. Brown, isn't it true that you employed Isabel's surgery as a wedge? That you fanned her resentment towards her father in order to justify leaving him? Kody's voice sliced through the courtroom, firm, steady, but laced with anger. Absolutely not. I would never take advantage of my child's pain like this. I wanted him there. She wanted him there. He is the one who decided to use our daughter's agony to make a point. He is the one who chose random rules over his own blood and family. I didn't have to fan the flames of resentment. He generated all of this himself. The jury, several of whom were parents themselves, saw not an angry ex-wife, but a mother fighting for her child. Then came Janelle Brown. Kody was not like Janelle. Janelle was not hot-headed. She was measured, straightforward, and practical. A witness who did not wish to be there, but who would not lie. Jessica Morales inquired, Mrs. Brown, can you explain the COVID protocols Mr. Brown attempted to impose on the family? They were extreme, Janelle said, not science-based, just based on his need for control. Did you think it was possible to have him set rules and still live a normal life? That is why my boys had to make a decision. His rules made life impossible. And did you know of Isabel's surgery and Mr. Brown's decision not to go? Yeah, Janelle said in a firm voice. I thought it was a horrible choice. I told him that. There were alternatives. He could have quarantined. It didn't have to end that way. It was a decision.